Are you telling me that the Fakertarians want to make... They have things on there. They're not even like humans. And they're like making comments. They try to make the most degenerate comments.
Archie, get the fuck off my stream.
That's the thing with like that what's his name? Hudak guy. Like who is, I will say, Nick, on the show you were at there, right? Amongst them, he's the smartest.
I believe Fakertarians has done more damage to the Libertarian Party than anybody Fakertarians tries to damage. Because it's a bunch of people who have no official position, they're just tweeting on their own personal timelines, and Fakertarians goes and screenshots it and publicizes this is what's wrong with the Libertarian Party.
Fakertarians has lost so much credibility that no one is willing to... It's the boy who cried wolf. Like, they might actually be right one day. Maybe there'll be one day where there's an actual Nazi that someone puts on our show. We're just going to be like, eh.
Well, the Fakertarians hop on and they're like, ooh, that's a anti-Semitic, and people are like, that's anti-Semitic, and I'm like, first of all, you fucking idiots, I'm half Israeli.
And while I'm at it, you know what? Fuck that page, those Fakertarians. Fuck that page too. Fuck all those guys. They're on my shit list too. Fuck them, giving me fucking shit for going on fucking Stephen Molyneux's show. Hey, they're fucking the Fakertarians one, who actually pissed me off more because from what I've been told, there's like a couple decent people attached to that. Fuck them. Fuck those guys. They're gonna fucking give me shit for fucking going on Stephen Molyneux's podcast to advocate against war because you didn't like that I called him great.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fakertarians podcast. I'm your host, John Hudak, along with Jeremy Kantorowicz, one of my sock accounts, our tech guy, Chaos Cat, and I guess I didn't know what Caitlin wanted to go by, so Caitlin. So today we have on our show, episode 37, we have John Drake. John, how are you doing today?
I am great. It seems like you guys are very popular.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of fans. Dave Smith loves me. But, so we'll get started off a little bit. Can you tell us, so for anyone who doesn't know, John ran in the recall election for California governor. John, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself just to start off?
So I was the youngest candidate to run in the California recall election. I saw every other candidate running as a replacement, and I thought, gee, holy crap, all of these guys suck. And so I just figured, you know what? Why not put my hat in the ring and be like a real voice for like real people instead of giving power to all of these lunatics.
Nice. So are you going to do this again in 2022?
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to primary Newsom. It's going to be fun.
I look forward to seeing that. So when you were running for governor, like what were like your kind of biggest policy positions that you had?
Yeah, my biggest policy positions were mainly focused on affordable housing, affordable education, and affordable healthcare, with an emphasis on how it affects young people and how to solve those issues going forward with them included in the conversation. Because if we're not including like the future in the discussion of how to solve issues that will affect the future, then we're going to be talking about the same issues again in another 4 years. And both the left and right are very good at taking these issues and using them as talking points, but never actually doing anything to solve these issues.
That sounds pretty progressive. Speaking of things that are progressive, tell us more about submissive and breedable.
Yeah, so the submissive and breedable tagline I used was I was actually on TikTok and I saw like videos with them just blowing up like all comments, submissive and breedable, saw videos. I was like, you know what? This seems like it's pretty catchy. It seems like it's pretty hip. So I was like, you know what? Why not utilize that into the campaign, like spread it out a little bit more, create my own graphic, and kind of let people sort of bring people into the campaign at that moment through what is considered a trend. And so it kind of stuck. Like a lot of people thought it was hilarious. I mean, I guess it was a double-edged sword. It brought attention to my campaign, but at the same time, it then made people like really not take it too seriously. But I think when people like went to the website, if they weren't just looking at the image itself and actually went to the website, looked at what I stood for, looked at the things I want to do, I think more people were kind of willing to see me as more of like a legitimate candidate than a fake candidate.
So actually, I kind of vermin supreme there with his free ponies.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's actually how I found you too. Was just scrolling through on TikTok and seeing that, and I'm like, huh, and then I just kind of died. I'm like, hey, he seems kind of cool.
I mean, with worrying about like people taking the campaign as a joke or something, you still did better than the Libertarian Party candidate did. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that like being accused of sexual harassment and like half endorsing Larry Elder is a great campaign strategy, but whatever Jeff Hewitt wanted to go with, I mean.
See, my biggest issue with the whole recall that happened with the Democrats who were like pushed to the mainstream, I was okay with I don't want to say Bob Ross. That's not his name. What was it? Something Ross. He was like third place.
I'm just gonna pretend it's Bob Ross.
Yeah. Brandon Ross. There we go. Brandon Ross. Like I was okay with him because I genuinely believed in the things he was saying. But you had like front runners like Kevin Paffrath, who kind of endorsed Larry Elder over Newsom. Said he would rather have Larry Elder be governor than Newsom. And I'm like, and you're running as a Democrat, and that's the position you took. But he was pushed to the mainstream, like as the leading candidate, just because he started out with a bunch of followers. And so they gave like zero airtime to other Democrats except him, and so that gave him votes. Then you had people who were voting based off of who people's identities were. So like a lot of identity politics sort of like really seeped into the recall on the Democratic side. So you had people like Holly Beatty get like a lot of votes. People like Jacqueline McGowan get a lot of votes. People like Armando Perez Serrato get a lot of votes, even though they literally stand against some of the hardcore things that Democrats stand for. Holly Beatty says some disparaging things about transgender people, says that that they have mental issues and that they're sick. Jacqueline McGowan doesn't believe in mask mandates, is very or vaccine mandates, is very pro-gun. And then you have Armando Perez Serrato, who's anti-choice, pro-gun, calls himself a Catholic Democrat. But if you can't distinguish where your religion starts and ends and where politics begins and ends, then I don't trust you with the keys to power, really. And so you saw like a lot of identity politics play into the recall, and so you saw candidates who would normally never get like a lot of votes actually get pushed to the mainstream as well.
That's really interesting. One thing that I think I would want to mention is that everyone else here is probably, I would say, pretty pro-gun, right? But that's a difference that I can cope with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I have friends who are staunchly pro-gun, and we get into heated debates, but we're still great friends. But I think it was interesting that more people were so concerned about whether or not this person was a woman, whether this person was Hispanic, whether this person was this and that, rather than actually seeing whether or not the policies actually aligned with what they believed. And most Democrats, I would venture to say, are not very pro-gun, or not very anti-choice, or not very anti-mask or vaccine mandates.
Right. So occupying an interesting space, claiming to be Democrat, and then just sounding like a Republican.
It's kind of like the Republicans who claim to be libertarians that we always deal with.
So like Kevin Paffrath, that was the reason why I decided to run, because he's from he's from the town I live in, Ventura, and I was like, this dude's really representing my city. Oh God, I hate it because so obviously I think we know the general Democratic platform, statewide rent control, things, affordable housing, education, all that sort of stuff. Everything that Kevin Paffrath. So first of all, Kevin Paffrath is a multimillionaire real estate broker. If it comes down to things like, statewide rent control, would he support it? I would venture to say no, because for the past 50 years in California, you've had nothing but like these multimillionaires being in the governor's position, and in that span of time, the quality of life for the average Californian has continued to steadily get worse, because all these people tend to be very self-interested. And so I was very hard pressed to be like, yay, Kevin! Oh my god, I would totally want him. I was very hard pressed to see him as the front runner.
Yeah. Another really important question that I actually had for you is sexual anarchy destroying America?
Sexual liberation, you mean?
Did you say who said that the other day? Oh, Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk.
Oh, Charlie Kirk, yeah.
So wait, I've never heard of sexual anarchy. Do you mean like sexual liberation, like being?
We don't know. Charlie Kirk.
I don't think we know.
Okay.
I think he means anything other than missionary is destroying America.
Apparently the Democrat platform is sexual anarchy.
Well,
if I knew the Democrats were for like eating ass, I would have been a Democrat a long time ago.
Jeez. Okay. I would say sexual anarchy. You know, I will say this. I don't know anything about Charlie Kirk's platform with sexual anarchy. I've never heard of that before. But he did show up to my church once, and because he was a celebrity, and as I posted on my Facebook, I took a picture with him because I was like, oh my god, it's a celebrity. I'm famous. Look at me, everyone. and so of course during the campaign you had like these like staunch like no ground leftists who won't give you an inch on anything. They were like, you're not a true Democrat. You took a picture with Charlie Kirk. I'm like, I would have done the same thing with Caitlyn Jenner if she was in the same room. I would have been like, look at me meeting all these famous people.
Right. I mean, yeah, you don't pass up an opportunity, even if, you know, for the most part.
I mean, I would take a picture with Dave Smith, and we know how we get along.
Now, I mean, if the picture with Charlie Kirk was like your profile picture for a year or something, that would be a different story.
Yeah, no.
I would absolutely make a profile picture with Charlie Kirk, my profile for a year, but I would put different frames on it to make it just like really inappropriate.
Shrink his face even further. Is this like head to face ratio really like in real life?
Okay, so first of all, I walked up. I'm 5'10". He was towering over me, and he's like 6'3", got like a very broad body, but his head is like the size of a pea on it, and so it's kind of like a half melted snowman. It's kind of weird.
Oh, that's great.
You know,
never
the
really
noon sun
see...
only hits the top snowball.
So like you decide to come on our show, and you probably don't really know too much about us or anything, but like when it comes to like the libertarian sphere of of politics, like kind of what do you know, who do you know, what do you know about?
We'll be friendly. You can shit talk us if you want.
So I know libertarianism. First of all, I'm not a fan of libertarianism. Libertarianism as an ideology. I don't know if you guys actually subscribe to libertarianism or if you guys are just trolling libertarianism, but while still being libertarians. But for the most part, I've never been a huge fan of libertarianism. I don't like the idea of. I wouldn't say the individual. I think the individual is important, but I don't think the individual supersedes the community per se. I don't think you should be championing one's right to take advantage of other people just in the name of a free market or it's a free society. I think every single person should definitely be like held up. That's just more of a moral fundamental difference. But I do know like the average libertarian memes. I do subscribe to them on Instagram and all those sorts of things. I do enjoy that toaster YouTube video. What do I need next? A license to toast my own toast in my own goddamn toaster or whatever. I can't remember the exact line.
Oh yeah, that's Daryl. So I do know, we're big fans.
Yeah. No. So I'm very aware of that meme culture. I'm very invested in it, and I'm also on libertarian TikTok. I don't know how I got on there, but I do enjoy it.
Probably us. That's probably our fault. Sorry.
It's that I don't remember his name, but he's like super free market, but he's like very popular. Like if you say the name, I'll probably remember it.
Was it Vermin Supreme?
No, but I do love him a lot. I wish I could meet him.
Really?
Yeah.
I ran Vermin Supreme's Twitter for a long time.
Ah,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
No, His
We're all
whole
big
hockey
Vermin
stick and
fans.
zombies, I was like, oh, this guy's amazing. 2016 was an entirely different universe.
Yeah, Vermin Suprema is pretty cool. We like our Vermin.
So you said that you're not really sure if we subscribe to libertarianism or if we're just trolling libertarians. I'll maybe add a little context to that for you. I used to consider myself a libertarian. Like, I don't anymore, even though I consider myself like a left-wing anarchist. I don't really identify with the label libertarian anymore. I haven't been a member of the Libertarian Party for a year. Not sure how I want to participate in politics going forward, other than to do anarchism. But there are most of the people here, I would say, are invested in the Libertarian Party in some way or another, and trying to shape its future and make it less toxic and less horrible. And I think people in this room are pretty good at that.
God.
Yeah, so I guess like I subscribe as a libertarian, sort of like ideologically, but I also troll libertarians, so it's a yes.
Oh, yes,
I mean, I guess libertarians trolling other libertarians is pretty much. I mean, that's like a core tenet of libertarianism, at least American libertarianism at this point.
As much as you hate libertarians, you'll never hate libertarians as much as another libertarian.
A classic libertarian meme is Willie from The Simpsons saying the libertarians are their worst enemies.
Yeah,
you know the format.
About right.
Yeah, and nobody's a real libertarian except me.
Yeah. No,
So yeah, we're pretty self-aware for a libertarian podcast. That's for sure.
I do enjoy it. I love the self-awareness. A lot of people who tend to host political podcasts don't usually see their own irony.
Yeah, we just kind of fuck with people
for about 2 years, and now I do this. So.
Okay, wait. So, what do you all do for like outside of this whole podcast sort of thing?
I just work retail. I'm boring. Other than this, like I work retail like this, so you know.
I run communications and digital marketing for libertarian candidates.
Nice.
Being the presidential candidate for a while, and then the vice presidential candidate, who I still run his communications.
Jorgensen? You did Jorgensen?
I did Jorgensen's for the first month after the
That was a good story.
Back when she was tweeting about police brutality and like really hard on the issues, and then a month later, on my fucking birthday, I was moved over to the vice presidential team. But it was a blessing.
Moved over.
I love it. He's awesome. Traveling pretty great. I still work for him, so yeah.
I just pissed off Dave Smith.
Oh, bait.
Yeah, John Hudak just lifts.
Lifts and piss off Dave Smith.
Sounds about right.
I do. Gosh, what do I do? Forecasting and analytics for a call center.
Okay.
Are we doxing ourselves right now?
Yeah.
I go tell my boss.
Here's my zip code. Here's my state.
I tutor math at a college, so.
Oh, epic! I wish I had that in high school. I sucked at math in high school, except for I was good at geometry, trigonometry, and statistics. Algebra, you lost me. I was like,
hard ones. Yeah.
For me, my main one is calculus. I really enjoy calculus.
Oh my god, that's like the devil speaking.
See, and I was terrible at geometry and trig, and really good at algebra.
Were you also terrible at English and history and that sort of stuff?
English I mostly hated. History, social studies, that kind of stuff, loved all of that.
All right, neat.
I'm just terrible in general.
Mood.
Outside of this, I do photography on Diet Caitlin, and I do insurrectionary anarchism propaganda. That's about it.
Oh yeah, I do propaganda.
Okay, that's an interesting career path. Propaganda.
I mean, do you make memes on the internet to influence politics?
I guess I am a meme.
You're a propagandist. Sorry. Welcome to the club.
Oh, jeez. Could you imagine? You know what I should do? This just came across my mind. I should put my cat face, my cat boy picture on top of Mal's body, and then just change the description line underneath it. That'd be hilarious.
That would be hilarious.
Oh my
Little cat
God.
boy Mac. Little cat mask. Oh, jeez. So I
What
guess,
are your main issues with libertarianism?
My main issue with libertarianism is I think it's the inherent idea that people can. I would say this differs among libertarians. I've met libertarians who think people are morally good, so that if you give them the opportunity to be able to pursue things without regulation and limitations, they can do good for not just themselves but everyone else around them. I think that itself is sort of naive. I don't believe in the. I don't really subscribe to the idea that people are morally how would you say it? That people are inherently good. I think that for the most part, you do need regulations to keep people from taking advantage of other people. I think that government has a huge duty to be able to limit corporate power, limit the way individuals have the ability to influence policy that affects more than just themselves. And so when I hear libertarians talking about like minimal government, and there's usually never like a real concise version. They either want like a strong local government and a weak federal government, or they are sort of okay with a mix of things. I just think it's kind of naive in and of itself. So I just don't really see it. I see it more as a meme ideology than I do like a legitimate way that things should be ran.
Let me posit a question to you really quick.
Yeah.
How about, so say that I would believe this was naive. Okay, so if you believe people are not, fundamentally good and they need to be controlled, or they need to be, controlled by like a central authority, what about the people that control the central authority? Like, so if people are bad, why do we need a government made up of people?
Yeah, so how I see it is that when you have an overarching system, as long as you have people with good intentions coming in there and being able to set up that system and be able to create a system that sort of has checks and balances like the American government does. People like Teddy Roosevelt, who came in with the intention of breaking up monopolies, and he did that. I think, and you have a strong government like sort of emerge from that with those systems in place that allow people to sort of really not be able to take advantage of the system while they're in there. I think that's more or less okay than just saying, oh, because people are inherently bad altogether, then we should be by ourselves and be able to choose what we can and cannot do for ourselves. Again, the way people thrive are in communities, and those communities have to be controlled by someone or something. And I'm more of a fan of a representative form of government, but like a stronger version of it. So I like the American federal government. I just wish it was more. I just wish it was more utilitarian than it is liberal. I wish that there were more things that were centralized, more things that were that just have more regulations to keep corporations from taking advantage of average workers. Because the problem is that when you have corporate influence in politics, when you have rich people influencing policy, then they can use a government that was sort of regulated to keep corporations from influencing policy to re-influence that policy again. And I think that's the biggest issue progressives deal with going forward, is a way to sort of stop the ultra wealthy, stop these multinational corporations taking advantage of everyday people.
Now, let me follow that up. Like, what if the system that exists actually, are you familiar with regulatory capture at all?
Maybe. Explain it.
Okay, so think about like this way. The people with the most capital and established firms are able to buy off regulators or bribe regulators in order to pass regulations that suit them and hurt their competition, hurt the worker, hurt the consumer. And through that mechanism where they're the gun in the room, they are the enforcement, they are able to enforce their own will on everybody else at the expense of everybody else. So how do you deal with that?
And you're talking about corporations being able to do this?
Yes, corporations mainly would be one of the biggest users of
lobbyists.
How I would not be okay with it because again, it basically puts the enforcement of I guess sort of any sort of progress in the hands of for-profit motives that generally lead to single entities benefiting rather than entire communities as a whole. So,
yeah, what if I told you that was the status quo, though?
Well, most likely it is in the United States, and that's one thing many on the left sort of aim to try and dismantle. We don't like the idea that you can have single entity corporations with a for-profit motive being able to profit off of people's lives when that's not how government is supposed to function. Government is supposed to be there to be able to make your life easier, safer, and more equal. Whether that's equal opportunity or even equitable starting points. It doesn't have to be an equitable outcome. So you don't have to end at the same place, but you're given an equal starting point as someone else. If you have a corporation taking advantage of that, if you have special interests taking advantage of that, then you're not living in a free society at all.
Well, yeah, I would say we don't live in a free society right now. And
we aim to dismantle that.
So we do too, in a different way.
Yeah, interesting.
And I want to say,
without government, we wouldn't have corporations because corporations literally exist because of government and state enforcement. So we have that, and then also we're not anti-community and anti-collective. There's a lot of like libertarians out there like, oh, collectivism is dumb. Like that's just dumb. But we're for the individual in more of the like self-autonomy position. So it's more just like, and I hate the term like you own yourself, and I'm sure John Hudak and I could probably fight about that, but there's some semantics there. But that you own yourself, you own your body, and I don't like the term ownership. So it's hard to explain without it.
You control yourself.
Yes, you control yourself. You make the decisions about yourself. Only you can say what happens to you and your body. That's kind of what it boils down to. And corporations, I feel, in their current state, in the way that they basically self-regulate, and not self-regulate in the way that we're thinking, but self-regulate is in they write the regulations that shut up all of their competition, help them grow, help their profit margins grow, and literally run half the government. We don't want that.
No, I agree. Most libertarians I have met, like whether or not they're at my church or come up to me at my college and being like, I don't agree with the way that you think government should be run. I'm like, well, you're stupid anyway, so it's not like I really care. Because a lot of them do come from that sort of position that you have, if you have limited government, corporations will be these great divine beings that won't take advantage of people. I'm like, oh my God, can you quit being so cringe?
There's a lot of corporate like bootlicking basically in the liberty movement, and I'm not a big fan. I don't like corporations. I don't like the massive conglomerate bullshit. But without government, I guess privilege that the corporations have, competition opens up and people can like rightfully compete without them being shut down.
I agree that things like I'm very. Markets exist in any kind of society. They can exist in feudal systems. They can exist in monarchist, communist, capitalist systems. It's just the intent of which those markets aim to benefit people that really determines whether or not those markets are good or moral. And in the American system, a lot of those markets don't aim to actually benefit the greater good. We have a very progressive tax system. We have a very progressive market economy. But when it comes to social welfare, we have a very regressive social safety net, and so we have to see are the profits that are being made going to help people, or are they going to be reinvested back into those corporations and make them more profitable and more and give them more power, or are they going to finally be spread out to the communities? And we want to be able to spread it to the communities, obviously.
Oh yeah, no, I want to dismantle that system from the ground up. Like that's the system we have now, like burn it all down. Fuck all that. But I definitely not on the whole like corporate bootlicking bandwagon.
Yeah, no, and I find it ironic that so many of these people who claim, and I would say that they tend to be the vast majority of libertarians that I've come across, at least.
Yeah.
They're always so against, like, you're a state bootlicker, like, fuck the police, and then the minute corporations come in, they're just like, just step right here.
Right here, Daddy.
Put
Yeah.
all your weight on it. And I'm like, okay, like, don't tread on me unless you have $1 billion. I get it.
That's the majority of right-wing libertarians, and
Yeah.
most left-wing libertarians will not walk up to you and identify themselves as libertarians. So, yeah. I mean, I actually agree with a lot of your criticisms of libertarianism, especially when it comes to kind of like the meme-ified right-wing libertarian version that most people get exposed to.
Yeah.
And it's a real shame that that's become what libertarianism means. That's why I don't identify as a libertarian anymore.
Yeah, and that was a huge reason for my disapproval of libertarianism, because I can understand your version of libertarianism. I actually push that more than I would the right-wing version, where it's sort of hypocritical in and of itself. It doesn't really understand reality, where they think everyone, if you just give them enough leeway that they're going to do the right thing, I just can't take it seriously.
Right, and I understand that, well, we live in a society, so and we always will, and
Yeah.
no matter what happens, there's going to be some system of getting consensus in society for how we should behave, how we should form, shape, and interact in markets. Right, what our individual rights are, what we owe each other, what duties we have to each other. And so for me as a left-wing anarchist, it's really important that we focus on community too, and not just the kind of like I don't care about consequences individualism that a lot of right-wing libertarians go out and chatter about.
Yeah, actually, I would say what kind of, I guess, separates me from standard progressives is that I actually champion a more of a corporatist system. Now, don't get that wrong. It's not corporatocracy for those out there, where corporations have power. It's basically a compulsory economy in which states allow corporations to exist as long as they are really benefiting the overall social welfare apparatus. So that's the main system of Northern Europe. That's the main system of Scandinavia. It's more liberalized than the Chinese version, which I'm okay with. And so when I say I'm a progressive, I mean like I'm a Scandinavian progressive. Like I push for things that there's like less regulations on smaller businesses, more regulations on bigger business. If the government cannot handle the nationalization of oil and running it all at the same time, nationalize the oil industry, but then sublease the management of that to a private corporation and let them reap profits off of those, as long as the oil itself is going to benefit the people here. I'm all for that.
Right.
Do you think
Especially
the
when it comes to
companies that
natural
are
resources.
do you think the companies that are being hired by the government to run those have an incentive to run it well, because the government just kind of like cuts the checks and don't have a vested interest in the individuals that it's going to?
Yeah. So how I see it is that sorry, I had it on my
Oh, you're fine.
my ADHD just said nope.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, no, like I did
You're in
not
good
take my
company.
finance before I did this. What was the question again?
So
we
do
were
you
talking
think that the companies hired by the government to, run the oil companies that
Yes,
are nationalized, do you think that they have an incentive to run them well when the government will cut checks no matter what the result is? Because we've seen that for decades and decades.
Yeah,
and
no. So I don't agree with this idea of the government always going off to the lowest bidder on sort of things. I think that the government needs to step back and see which company is actually going to be willing to actually handle this effectively, and so if a company is going to go in and manage a nationalized industry, like let's say that's the DMV, let's say that's the oil industry, let's say that's electricity, they're going to have to put in their own money to do it, and then they can be recompensated for the amount of work and the effectiveness of what they did with that company. I don't think that just writing a blank check or writing a check, no matter how good something or no matter the effort that's put into something is effective. We saw that in the Soviet Union, where no matter what the quality came out, you would still get paid for it. And that's how you got dilapidated buildings that didn't last 30 years. Like my country in Latvia, you had like new Soviet-style architecture get torn down 40 years later because it turns out none of it was up to standard. None of it was up to code at all. And it was actually more hazardous. So I think the government has a duty to not just provide a better experience for the people using these sorts of systems, but at the same time, they also have to be very diligent in how the money is being spent. So I would say for the most part, as long as you change the way the government pays industries, then you're fine.
Okay. Follow up though. What happens when the other side gets in office?
Yeah, no, that's the biggest issue that we're dealing with. With the other side, see, and that's the thing that we talk about a lot, is that no progress ever gets made because it's always we want more government, we want less government, and so then institutions that are proving to actually be effective and helpful always get defunded, and so I would say that part of it would also maybe be, I think the most permanent solution would be a constitutional amendment to either state constitutions or the federal constitution that says certain things are rights, certain things have to be done this way. Let's say industries with the capacity to change an entire nation's economic status should be nationalized by the government. That would be something you'd probably have to constitutionalize. Otherwise, it can keep going back and forth.
It can be pretty subjective at times, though. Like at certain times, that would have been the automomotive industry.
Yeah.
So I think that spans a lot of industries, and it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, no, I was actually talking with because I had another one of those sort of podcasts on the CDC network, and we were talking about being specific. So like take the infrastructure bill, for example, that is currently out there. When talking about infrastructure, you have to define what that infrastructure is. Is it human infrastructure? Is it physical infrastructure? Is it environmental? Is it all of this and that? Define it and list what that actually entails, and then see if those things will actually meet any one of those descriptions. If it doesn't meet one of those descriptions, don't fund it. And yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect solution, but I think it's better than whatever system we're having here. And the whole thing is in California, especially, if we push for something like the nationalization of the oil industry or the power industry, and make it so that it's heavily regulated by the government, but sub-managed by private corporations, that still reap the benefits of those, but that things become overall more cheap for the average Californian. I think you will. I think because we are a supermajority in California, if we are able to initiate that, I don't think we have any real concern that's going to be rolled back.
All right, I have a couple follow-ups, but I'm going to let other people talk.
Sorry.
Conversation.
You can hit the follow-ups if you want.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
about
California and utilities. The big fires happened a couple years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, the PG&E
blends together, but the PG&E fire, mainly because it was mismanaged. They cut costs. They really fucked up company. I won't get into all the specifics, but yeah, it was totally fucked. Do you think that they would completely flip their business model on not cutting costs and cutting corners all the time, just so they can come in? Like if they're going to be bidding for a government contract, they're going to want to bid low.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I
guess, how does that work? Also, with we recognize that bureaucracy inhibits progress. That's
bureaucracy
the thing
sucks.
that happens.
Yeah.
How does going to a higher level of oversight take away the problems with the bureaucracy? You know what's best for your household. How much toilet paper you need. Some dude in Sacramento does not know how much toilet paper. You know what I mean? That's very, very.
So I think someone in one of my Twitter DMs actually suggested me this, and I really did like this idea that if you have a nationalized power system, but you distribute it to local, but you distributed the management of those to like either local communities or local businesses to be able to determine how these things go out and how much. Obviously, you still need that infrastructure. You still need people who are electricians to know how to do it. But if you give local communities the power to be able to decide these things rather than have the state government saying, "Oh, this town needs this" versus "this town needs that," I think you'll see a much more effective management of these power facilities and a better distribution for what each community needs in and of itself. I would also say that as for like PG&E and these and lower bidding, again, I think it's about what can these companies do for the whole power thing rather than how low can you bid. Like if you're going to bid like, oh yeah, we'll handle this facility for $12.3 million, but we'll make sure fires happen every fucking weekend. I don't care. I'm not gonna do that because it's going to obviously destroy more things. It's going to cost more in the long run than just saying we'll go for this bidder who will do $30 million, but actually do a lot more to not only protect the environment but provide for the needs of the community.
Right. There's a lot of culture that needs to change. There's a lot of values
and bureaucracy.
Like
I would say there's actually a lack of bureaucracy when it comes to major corporations and more bureaucracy when it comes to small businesses. So like, and we saw this heavily in the whole COVID-19 pandemic here in California, where small businesses were being held to standards that giant corporations were not. When it came to PPP loans, you had these major industries like Amazon, Apple, Tesla, all these billion and trillion dollar companies, like taking out PPP loans, wiping out our reserve of those, even though they were profiting the most from the pandemic, and there were none left for small businesses that were struggling. And actually, one of my biggest platforms on my website is that if the government basically halts economic commerce throughout the state and says you can't do this and that, you can't buy and sell goods, then I don't think the government can then retroactively then come in and say, we're also going to collect taxes. We're also going to collect your property tax. We're going to collect any sales tax that exists, because it's not fair to small businesses. I come from a family of small business owners. If we're told, hey, we can't work, if we're told,
it's
hey, we
okay
can't
to
make
say
money.
fuck taxes on this show. We won't be.
Yeah. So like if we're told we can't do this and that, but oh yeah, we still have to pay for this, then I don't think that government has the interest of the people at hand. And especially in California, where 90% of our businesses are small businesses, we treat them like absolute shit, and we have to be able to be better than that. We have to be able to stand back and actually value those who contribute the most to the job market and those who contribute most to our communities, and those are small businesses.
I feel like decentralizing power and removing the lobbying ability of the larger corporations when they write the regulations that put all that burden on the small businesses would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And also when you said localizing control, that's very libertarian of you.
It's funny. So I was actually because I was on the CDC network, and we were talking about like term limits. Like, will term limits work? And I was like, I hate to say it, it won't, because unless you change campaign finance laws, unless you have campaign reform, then even if you get rid of the terrible politicians, a new one will come in who's corporately funded, corporately backed, and then they're going to do that will of the corporation rather than, again, their communities. And so it really does become, where is this money coming from? How are we funding how are we funding the government? How are our politicians getting their money? And if they're getting money from corporations, we need politicians who are somehow miraculously elected to be able to then start creating policies that would eventually strip them of that power. Like in the recall, the state assembly had no problem changing all the election rules 10 days before we had to submit our paperwork to be on the ballot, but they couldn't do campaign finance reform. There is clearly a huge problem there because the people on the campaign committee are corporately funded, and so it really does become, where is that money coming from, and how do you limit that power?
Yeah, welcome to the club. We've had trouble getting on the ballot for 50 years.
Look at me. I already destroyed the Libertarian candidate, even though this
You
is my
did,
first
and
race ever.
you did.
You did a
First
great
race
job.
ever. That's freaking mental.
I'm so proud of you.
Especially Jeff Hewitt.
Yeah.
I'll go on the record that Jeff Hewitt is a massive piece of shit.
I knew nothing about him, but the minute I saw like Libertarian, I was like, thank God.
He's very Republicanish.
Oh, God.
So I just want to talk about like power for a second, just government power in general.
Yeah.
So like it's fair to say you don't think everyone has good intentions, right?
Yeah.
And you'd agree that like people with bad intentions often seek out power over others?
For the most part, but I will say this. I come from a Hobbesian point of view. I think that government is necessary for states to exist, and I think that a bigger government in general is much better for a safer society. I don't like Lockean theory when it comes to government. I'm much more Hobbesian, but so my entire preference really comes from like the whole idea of like international realism and local Hobbesianism. But yeah, continue.
But like if people with bad intentions, like for the most part, do seek out power, they're often like deceptive about it, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
And wouldn't centralizing power in government just make it easier for those people to exploit others?
Well, I would actually argue no, because if you have virtuous people, even though they're far and few in between, in those positions of power, creating policies that would eventually regulate those same systems, so that they can't be taken advantage of, like the founding fathers did with the American government, where they're like, we're going to distribute everything evenly so that no one branch can take over this and that. Then I think even if someone is like super power hungry, they themselves cannot really take advantage of a group of people unless that system is changed. And the most that system has changed has been in the form of campaign finance. But even then, we're not seeing like back in the 1920s when you had these gangs go out and force people to vote this certain way. We're not having corporations dictating literal candidates and openly bribing them. So I think we have a form of modern bribery, but for the most part, I don't think it can really be taken advantage, at least in the American sense. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, so isn't like if you have virtuous people in there, isn't that kind of a big if?
It's a big if, but it's also a big. But I would also say that if you have a society that's sort of built around trust and equality, you'll tend to have more virtuous people running for office rather than bad people running for office. So, like, if you look at Western Europe for the most part, the checks and balances that exist in those countries, even in the Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, for the most part, the people who run for office tend to be more virtuous and more community driven than here in the United States, than here in China, than here than Eastern Europe, where you have like a lack of checks and balances, you have more corporate influence, and so if there is financial motivation, if there's political motivation to somehow be able to control people's lives more than actually helping your local constituents or the state as a whole, then I think that does lead to much more corruption, and that leads to more bad people in office. So I think if you do have that, sorry, I'm sort of rambling, but I think if you do have that sort of system where you can create virtuous people, then I think you'll only mainly have virtuous people in office. But then you have the weird outlier like Australia, but that's a whole nother story.
I mean, but if it's a societal problem, wouldn't it be... Oh.
Can I join real quick?
Oh, we got Alex.
Hold on.
Okay.
So my family's from Macedonia, right? Which is in Eastern Europe. I'm literally one generation away. My parents are both immigrant. My dad's immigrant. My mom's first generation. So the problem is, if you're saying we need virtuous people, there is virtuous people in office in Macedonia, but that's not the problem. The problem isn't money, because you can get dirt fucking poor in Macedonia and still get office and control over lots of people. The problem is, who do you know? At the end of the day, that's it. It's not money. It's not it's not anything. It's just who do you know. The checks and balances. You're right, John. You're right. I'm also kind of drunk, so like if you can't hear me that well, that's my problem.
Okay, that makes that makes
But the problem is, like the prime minister, right, of Macedonia just changed the name of the country, the entire fucking country, illegally.
Yeah, North
Europe.
North Macedonia in order to be part of the EU. I know about this. Yeah.
Yeah. He changed it fucking illegally. Like that. All you fucking have to know is know people. He wasn't rich before he got in there. I don't think. Like I think that too. You fucking know. Like John, you probably spent like $5 in your campaign for governor. Recall. Like I don't actually know, but like compared to the people you beat, they probably sent you a fucking shit ton, and you probably beat them fucking with Twitter. Like I bet.
All I
Okay.
do.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Let me interrupt you. Okay. What's the point?
Money doesn't win, and we know that it doesn't win.
Money does win. No. In the American capitalist, over consumerized state that we live in, money wins. Okay, the average election cost in the 1950s was maybe like $20,000 to $30,000, and you could do it. Now it's around $4 to $5 million. So money does play a huge role.
But it has diminishing methods.
Which way you take away the mechanism which allows that, which the state allows that.
And that's again what we're trying to do.
Yeah, when you're talking about the primaries where money will win. But if you're in a general election, the two people that will make it will have similar amounts of money, or will have competing factors like fucking where's the guy from the LP, the Southerner, African American LP, Arkansas, I think he's running against Tom Cotton.
Ricky Harrington.
Yeah, Ricky.
Yeah, Ricky Harrison. Yeah, he ran with like very little money, but he used TV debates and social media, and he got like 33%, like with very little money. And he'll probably go run again for something somewhere in that state, and he will have a very good chance of winning. So diminishing returns. Yeah, you're right. There's a problem with money. It's mostly regulatory capture. Like, it's the same people. Like fucking the Pelosi family still runs California. Isn't
That was my drunk uncle ranting at Thanksgiving. It's great.
What?
What?
Isn't
We love you.
Related to the Pelosi family?
What?
Yes.
Yeah. They still fucking run the they fucking run the state at the end of the day. But I wish you were governor, John. John, I wish you were governor right now because you're the best cowboy governor known to man.
Thank you. That was all over the place. All right.
That's Alec.
That's Alec. Plus a few drinks.
What was your question?
I do not even remember what I was going to say at this point.
Let's talk about vaccines.
Vaccine mandates, let's fucking do it. You know why?
A lot of us here would disagree with you on that one.
You know what? The reason why I'm for vaccine mandates, and I don't know if you guys are for it or not, is mainly because I don't like Republicans, and I know it gets under their skin.
The thing is, even with us, like I'm against the mandates, and I still piss them off because I like talk about how the vaccines are good.
But see, if you have power and you can just piss an entire group off for the memes, why not?
I mean, that is a fair point.
Right.
Vehemently against the mandates.
But ultimately, again, when it just in general, I think that government has a duty for public safety and public health. And it's not the first time the United States has demanded vaccine mandates, nor is it the first time we've required masks. I think what was it? I think George Washington was the first president to institute a vaccine mandate. Big whoop. I don't care.
I mean, most presidents are war criminals, but
big whoop. Well, not big whoop. But again, like by an objective standard, yes. But again, it's the victors who write history, and so I guess we're technically not war criminals. But again, if America was tried in World War II, if we had lost, our generals would have been tried for war criminals terribly. But but mainly, a lot of it is about public health, but it's also mainly just because I don't care about these weird notions that somehow the vaccine is going to kill everyone who does it. It's like if you're going to do population control, You don't want the people who are in the forest with the guns being your only last surviving people. That would be the stupidest way for population control, because then you don't have a group of people you can actually control. Like is Randy with the old pickup truck with 10 rifles? Is Randy with the old pickup truck with 10 rifles going to do what the government says after the vaccine kills everyone, or is it going to be the people who took the vaccine?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think the vaccine. I think the vaccine's great. I don't think it's trying to kill everyone.
Safe,
yeah, but I have met tons of people who think it's like the mark of the beast, who think it's this and that. And so I just want to like have a mandate for it just to piss them off, because I'm so sick and tired of it.
I mean, I think those people are insane. I don't like the idea of government telling you like you have not for just this vaccine, but in general, the idea of someone in the government being able to tell you that you have to put something into your body. I just think it's about an autonomy issue.
What if I'm against it for the purposes of Darwin?
What?
For the purposes of
Go connect
Darwin.
to Wi-Fi.
I can't right now.
Go in the comments.
Okay.
Go in the comments.
I'll watch on Facebook. Bye, guys.
Love you, bye.
I love him to death, but oh my god. All right. Okay, I get your concern. I get your concern, and I do hear that concern a lot. Like, I don't want the government telling me what we can and cannot put into our bodies, but at the same time, let's say you have measles, right? The reason why we have vaccine mandates for those is that it also affects people who may not be able to get a vaccine. It may affect people who aren't already vaccinated, who are yet to be vaccinated. That comes out of your body and can infect them and do damage to them. That's why we have these things existing. And I get that the proposition that the government may be malicious and sometime in the future. I just don't see that as a huge problem. Because
I mean, I would definitely encourage people to get the vaccine for that reason. And I mean, but I think the government historically has been malicious at points. I mean,
I know, like to certain communities, like the Black community, with the whole syphilis thing. I get that, and
The
I
Native
understand
American
why Black people or African Americans are very weary on this sort of thing. But at the same time, I would say the United States in general has progressed past a point. Has progressed past that point where everything that they do is malicious against communities of color. I mean, we try so hard to sort of equitize all the barriers between us. Yes, there's things like redlining that still exist. Yes, there are still things that still lead to inequality. But for the most part, when it comes to public health, we're not actively injecting them unethically. We're not actively
Unless they're in the military, then they do.
Wait, you mean because of the vaccine mandate in the military?
Oh no, they test them on people in the military.
Yeah, that okay. How do I tiptoe around this? They don't have to work there.
I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So like when it comes to like mandates per se, like, you know, the like Biden's attempted OSHA mandate, which doesn't even exist yet. It's not even on paper. You know, like that is something that I'm very disagreeable to. You know, Delta mandating that their employees be vaccinated. My employer mandating that it be, you know, mandated, you know, a school, you know, and that's the thing is so many industries, so many places have adopted these mandates that, you know, it more or less is going to probably in the end render the, you know, the OSHA mandate more or less useless, because it does only, I mean, it only hits employers with 100 or more people anyways. I mean, which is a lot of people, obviously, but that's the thing is it something that's really necessary? Is it a necessary function? Is it a productive function compared to, you know, something you have a relationship with, you know, family or your employer, etc. You know, I think that's a better way to, you know, go about it versus, you know, this OSHA mandate.
I would argue when it comes to small businesses and private companies, if they want to choose to vaccinate, if they want to choose to mandate vaccines, that's up to them. I don't care. But when it comes to government-owned facilities, when it comes to government workers, I think that because the government is their employer, if they want to mandate that their employees, soldiers, police officers, blah blah, have to be vaccinated, then they should be vaccinated. I'm all for private entities, private security details, saying we're not going to do it. I don't care. That's up to them. If they want to die, they can die. But if it's like public police officers, if it's public firemen, if it's public doctors, or any healthcare worker in general, I think that's one of the few exceptions that I think. Huh?
I was just going to say. I was going to say that government employees is kind of a different issue for a mandate than like government saying like everyone has to have it. Like just hypothetically.
Well, yeah.
I mean, because in that view, I don't look at like a government employee or an employee as any different than Delta or my company or anything like that. You know, if the city mandates that, you know, they're employing these police officers and they mandate a vaccine, that's
But I think
a vaccine.
I think what this has really shown, though, is that not only do people distrust American governments in general, but I think it really just shows how terrible people are at just following basic orders. And I think, and I would argue,
follow orders. Fuck that.
Well, let me say this. I would argue that's a reason why we should have these mandates, because it's shown that people are so reluctant to do anything for quote unquote the good of the community, that if something like a lot worse than this comes around, then we're going to be dealing. Because I don't think COVID is as deadly as people like to, or I don't think COVID is as I don't think COVID is like the Black Death. But people think it's like the scariest thing in the world. It's not the worst thing in the world. But I think if we come around a strain that's a lot worse, much more contagious, it really shows that people are not able to make their own decisions, because they're so concerned about personal liberty that they've forgotten that they live in a community, that they've forgotten that they live in a society, and that part of living in that society and in that community means that you have to do things that sometimes that you may not like for yourself, but it's better for everyone else.
I think a lot of that distrust came from the government putting them out of work for 9 months.
Yeah,
and then giving them $600, like that'll cover your rent for 6 months.
Yeah, no, I mean,
they'd have to lie to them.
Like my whole thing is that I'm okay with vaccine mandates, mask mandates, but not if it starts to impede on the everyday civil liberties of the people living in those places. So like Australia, Melbourne, Victoria, all those places where you see videos of police firing rubber bullets at people wearing masks, at people just gathering of people who are vaccinated, but saying, "Hey, we want to still be able to walk outside of our house and get groceries." Then at that point, I will start to stand back and be like, "Are you doing this because you care about people, or are you doing this because there's some other ulterior motive? Are you trying to fulfill either a promise, like a campaign promise?" Because what happened in Australia is that they basically said, we're going to have a zero case. We're going to have a zero case state, where we're not going to allow a single case to exist in Australia. And what happened when they did that? They have literally infringed on average on like everyday liberties, like religious liberties, speech liberties, educational liberties, all these liberties that we take for granted in the West. They've literally said you can't have it because we're so concerned about public health and this and that they've literally created a society that's so fearful of freedom that these people don't even have freedom anymore. And that's what I'm concerned about.
You're sounding very permissive and freeable.
So I was going to say, though, that as someone who does take COVID seriously, I do think Australia is a good example of some of the issues with government. Because, I mean, when it really comes down to it, laws generally are enforced through violence or the threat of violence, no matter what that law is.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. That's the thing. That's a very big example of an outcome of that is, a mandate ultimately is, enforced at the, you can say end of a gun, threat of violence, something along those lines. And, and me personally, you talk about living in a society, which we do. And, you always hear, libertarians, don't tread on me. That kind of gets associated together. And really, I think of it more from an angle of, don't tread on anyone. So, I have a responsibility to those around not to, cough on Granny and get her sick. And, I'm responsible to, mitigate my responsibility, not mitigate my responsibility, but, mitigate my actions as to not harm other people, which is why I got vaccinated.
Yeah.
So that's what, I personally believe versus, these hardcore don't tread on me types that, just
I tread where I please. Awesome, Karen. Yeah. I agree. I think where libertarians lose me in the conversation is the idea that don't tread on me. Like, you can't do anything that infringes upon what I can and cannot do. There's a lot of things you can't do in a free society. Because you have to protect everyone else in a society, and so I think there's like obviously limitations of things that you can do, but I also think that there's limitations to things that government should be able to do as well. I don't think the government should be able to tell you to stay in your home for 3 months and then give you nothing in return for it, which is what they've been doing. Australia in general, I think, is a pretty terrible country as it is. So like. I wasn't expecting much from the whole COVID lockdowns for them to be like sort of good, but yeah.
So I come at it from more of like a utilitarian standpoint. I heard you mention that you're more from that angle as well. So even with the vax mandate, it's just say everyone's okay with it, everyone gets it.
Yeah.
It is a newer vaccine, and I'm not anti-vax. Like, go get your vaccine, go have fun with it. But a lot of people have adverse reactions, especially during the first couple of years, and you can't predict those. Mm-hmm. And leaving that on a bureaucrat or a senator or a House rep or whatever to try and foresee these issues and make sure the right people are excluded from the mandate, they're never going to get it right. People are going to get hurt. I have a vaccine injury from 12 years ago now, that I still deal with on like a daily basis. And that's a vaccine that I literally still see commercials for. It's 100% safe. Everything's great. Nothing bad has ever happened. And I've had people tell me that I'm crazy too. That's always fun. Yeah. But they can't see that stuff coming. You can't legislate out the potential bad outcomes.
No, I get it.
Someone's going to get hurt.
I've always come from the perspective that sometimes the risk, sometimes the cause is worth the risk, and that means like if a few people get hurt, but thousands more actually benefit from it, I tend to be more okay with it. I would say in cases like medical exemptions, I'm all for it. Obviously, sometimes there are breakthrough cases where sometimes even if you're like okay medically to do it and then you get it and then you have an adverse effect, I think the government has has an obligation to compensate you for that and trying to walk you through.
I think they should have an obligation not to tell you what to put in your body, because medical exemptions are extremely hard to get.
I get it, but at the same time, government has a duty to ensure public health, and if that means one person suffers from a vaccine by accident compared to 10,000 people benefiting from it, I think that one person is not justifiable in their opposition to something that can benefit a whole.
What if one person dies?
Okay, how many more people are saved? It's like the trolley problem. Would you kill one person, or would you save 4 people? Or would you kill one person to save?
I wouldn't pull it.
But yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't pull it. But I mean,
Well,
the thing is,
I wouldn't pull it to kill 4 people unless they're like pedophiles. If it's one person, I'd say let it keep going forward.
see, and here's the thing: is it's mandating something, and there being a known risk. So there is a certain level of what I would consider to be like a slightly acceptable risk. If I decide that yes, I do want to be vaccinated, and I go get vaccinated, and unfortunately there have been people that the Johnson & Johnson blood clot issue, for example. Now if I end up as a victim, there was a calculated risk taken, and that does become very unfortunate. And for that reason, I wouldn't want to mandate it. Voluntarily doing something, and an outcome that always involves risks, there's still there's a good risk that I'm going to be okay, and there is a very slight risk that something may happen. And for that reason, I don't think a government mandate could really be good in that sense, because you're forcing people to do something where instead of voluntarily taking a calculated risk. And then I lost my train of thought, but I think I got most of my point across.
You can't have the government weigh the calculated risk for you.
There we go.
But again, it's more of a fundamental moral difference between like, what do you think government's role is in combating public health or helping public health? And obviously, I think we're pretty set in our.
In the United States, it seems more often like it's the farmer combating public health. In the United States, more often.
Let's bleach entire neighborhoods now. But no, so that's more of like a moral difference, and I think that we're always going to agree to disagree. But in general, I think most Americans, especially at least on the West Coast, are more willing to ensure the safety of community over the safety of an individual, and I pretty much subscribe to that.
I think people's support for it is like support for the vaccine is great, but I feel like a lot of people who have already gotten the vaccine, who have already made that calculated risk choice,
No. There is a sense of
are more comfortable making that for other people, even though a lot of people are not as privileged as those who already got vaccinated and feel that they can.
I think if we're going to spread a great message of getting vaccinated, we cannot have people who are already vaccinated bitch about other people not being vaccinated. I think we have to be able to create an open and loving environment for these people and encourage them to get vaccinated. Obviously, I'm in favor of vaccine mandates, but what turns more people off from it is that the people who are vaccinated, they tend to try and bully other people who aren't. And I think overall, just tell people, get vaccinated, and everything will be much better.
I mean, wouldn't a government mandate be kind of bullying them into it in a way?
Well, I would say that people would probably be more willing to do, because the government has been outright. We've had government officials outright using words that would justify, I guess, an act of bullying on the playground, like being like, these people are so stupid for not doing it. You have the media perpetuating it. You have individuals on Twitter or on Instagram being like, oh, these people are fucking morons for not taking the vaccine, and so that already sort of turns people's emotions up. And then when you try and add a mandate rather than just have that mandate and people just going for it, I think that's the difference. So like,
is coercion voluntary though?
Voluntary coercion, you mean?
Yeah. Like, is it really voluntary, and they voluntarily making that decision if they're being coerced into doing it?
Well, I would say,
because that's a little rapey.
Well, it is iffy, but I would say that some forms of coercion are justified. I'm not someone who's like 100% yes is always good, 100% is always bad. I think that there is forms of good coercion, and I think public health, public safety, those are always forms of good coercion. And
persuasion and then coercion.
Yeah,
Like,
there's different.
oh, okay. So it's like schools, for example. If you want your child educated publicly, all off the public dollar, you have to be vaccinated. I 100% agree with that because because they're out there, and we have like a lot of different cases. Like I can't give you a specific. Maybe you could give me a specific case of public coercion.
Of what? Oh,
voluntary coercion. Sorry, voluntary coercion.
Oh no, I was asking like it's really
Yeah.
voluntary.
It would be
yeah.
Yeah, no,
I would say
What she's
that.
saying is when you use the word mandate, right, it implies that it's involuntary to whoever the mandate affects.
well, it implies the coercion aspect. Like if it's a
Yeah.
mandate, you're going to be losing out on something if you don't do this thing that clearly you didn't want to do because we're at this point. You might have, legitimate reasons. You might think that there's 5G. I don't know, whatever the fuck. There's a lot of fucking crazy people out there. I've heard some shit, but there are also like some people have legitimate reasons for like.
Yeah.
There.
I think those legitimate reasons should be taken into account. But at the same time, is that you never know.
They don't, though.
But the problem is that, and what we've seen a lot, like we've seen it on social media, is that we don't know who's bullshitting people on whether or not they actually have a medical exemption, whether or not they're actually afraid. They just don't want to take it because they think that they're a citizen of the world, and so we're sort of dealing with so what the government's now having to deal with is that we have that. With the spread of misinformation on just the vaccine in general, with the spread of uncertainty and conspiracy theories, that you have an entire portion of the population who's just unwilling to get vaccinated in general, whether or not this vaccine will affect them negatively or positively. And so having that mandate just basically says you get no choice in it because we can't trust that you're going to make the right choice anymore. And I agree with that aspect because there's so many people out there who use the idea of medical exemption as a form of not getting the vaccine, even though they may not actually have a medical issue with it. And
when it comes to medical stuff, though, a lot of it is predictive. There is no like 100% solid way to know if you're going to have an adverse reaction. It's you have 60% bad factors, you have 40%.
But then that goes into the fundamental idea. But then that goes back into the fundamental idea. Does the risk outweigh the benefit? And then
forcing someone who is a possible adverse reaction to get a vaccine and they have an adverse reaction, that is not okay ever in any situation. Because it's not like you're saving lives. It's not like you're giving them a cure for a disease they already have. You're giving them a vaccine for a disease that they may get.
Yeah. But again, I understand where you're coming from. I 100% do. But it's just a whole fundamental difference. I'm not going to waver on that. I think that I sometimes do think, I most of the time think that benefits are always better than the possible negative. If the risk is one person dies, but 10,000 are saved, I will take that any day.
How do you choose who dies?
How do you make a decision for other people?
Well, didn't you just say, Caitlin, that actually there's no way to determine who's going to die when it comes to adverse medical reactions? Listen, I want to ask you something, John Drake, just for a change of pace. What do you think is the ideal mechanism for a government vaccine mandate?
The ideal
mechanism. It should be constructed.
I think it should be constructed.
How should it be done?
I think what should have been done in terms of the vaccine mandate is that I think we had a huge overreaction to what COVID was. It was way overreacted. And so then forcing a vaccine that hadn't been tested, because most vaccines, the reason why people have public trust in vaccines is because they usually go like through years of testing and all that stuff, seeing what happens from it. This was so quick and was something that most people thought was just a regular sort of flu-ish thing. Like when I first had it, I thought it was just like a flu because it was basically around flu season, so it didn't really bug me. My mechanism that I would probably instilled for vaccine mandates would have been more like, here's what we're going to do over the next year and a half. You have a year and a half to try and adjust to it and all this and that. I would not have just said, if you're not vaccinated, boom, you're gone. I would not have done that because that
So like,
more people.
so like what you're saying is that like you would think that the government should like set like a date, or maybe like a schedule of dates, a series of dates.
I think there's like obviously exemptions for like medical people.
Right.
I think they should be immediately done, but for the most part, because they just accelerated it, lost of public trust.
And then, like, at the end of that time period, what happens to people who do not get the vaccine?
Then at that point, you should be able to see. At that point, we should be able to have like usually enough testing, because within a year, we usually know whether or not a vaccine is going to be good or not.
Okay.
I would say you lose your job after that if that is the outcome, or you're just subjected to frequent testing. A lot of people I know who don't want to take the vaccine also don't want to do the frequent testing. Like,
and so in this case, we're only talking about employees who work for government-controlled industries, right? Or government institutions.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think San Francisco.
You're not talking about a general population.
No. I think San Francisco sort of overstepped their bounds when they basically said when the city instituted every private establishment has to have all their employees vaccinated, and all customers going into these private establishments must also be fully vaccinated, or they have to be denied. I think that was not a good thing to do.
I think everybody here agrees with that.
Yeah, no, I that was a bit of an overstep, because that I mean because as long as you're sending kids to public schools, as long as kids are in public universities, as long as you have people going into public facilities like the DMV, hospitals, any sort of bank, that usually follows federal guidelines. As long as you're going into a post office, you still need to be vaccinated, or wear a mask, or be tested. And so at that point, for the most part, the general population will be safe from COVID. But trying to do this whole thing where if you're unvaccinated, you can't shop at your grocery store. Let's calm down. You're taking it too far, and you're making this seem a lot worse. You're acting like a tyrant, and it's showing like you're a tyrant. Like, you can be a tyrant, but don't make it so obvious.
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but I'm not sure we're going to unpack it. I think John Hudak might want to wrap up.
Yeah, I can appreciate the nuance there that goes a lot farther than some libertarians do.
Yeah.
Well, most progressives, I would say, are libertarian in their own way. It's just that we tend to be more socially. I don't want to say socially liberal. We tend to be more liberal when it comes to social welfare, but we're much more staunch when it comes to how money is being spent, where that money is going, and whether or not the community is being affected adversely.
Yeah. So quick before we wrap it up, gosh, it will be here forever, I think. Immigration, open the borders.
Actually, it's funny. So I take like an unpopular stand, even though I am an immigrant. I would say that if there are illegal immigrants that come into California or into the United States, we have an obligation and duty to help them and stimulate them and treat them with open arms. I would not encourage them to come over, because already the American, already our resources are stretched so thin we can barely help the people here as it is. But that doesn't mean that if someone comes over, I'm gonna be like, get the fuck out. I'm gonna be like, let's help you out. What can we do? What can you contribute? Like, let's work together and make this better. But open borders, no. Closed borders, no.
Yeah, I'm definitely very much an open borders type person. I think solving some of our issues abroad, drug war and things like that.
Well, that's more of a change.
That's gonna encourage much fewer people to need to immigrate, but but
well,
I'm
no,
definitely...
because if your foreign policy still remains drug wars and regime change, then that means more people are still going to be coming over, whether or not you have open borders. That's mainly a foreign policy issue. My whole thing with open borders is that if we continue this foreign policy where we keep destabilizing regions, the people who are going to be coming here, who are very poor, where they may not have enough jobs here, are going to devalue the American labor market, or are going to inflate where taxes are going. And so that means there's going to be like overall less resources to handle the issues we have here. In California, we don't even have enough to get over the 150,000 people off the streets, the homeless people off the streets, because we already have money that gets lost everywhere else.
If they sold the 59% of federal land that they held, they would have plenty of room to build housing for them.
Well, we still have like plenty of places. It's just that all of our money is tied up in different infrastructure projects. They're tied up in a lot of infrastructure projects. There's like, I'm not a fan of the speed rail. I say cut it.
Let them come.
Put it into homeless buildings. But yeah, no, I think having open borders but not changing foreign policy and not changing our idea of regime change is going to actually hurt us more if we add open borders to it.
I would say that we shouldn't do the things we do overseas. Obviously, we shouldn't have the foreign policy the United States has right now. At the same time, like, going to restrict people from coming here because of that.
Well, no, because
U.S. foreign policy. These people are victims of American policy, and I'm not going to deny them.
I get it. I get it. The problem is that if our foreign policy doesn't change, if our foreign policy continues, and then we also have open borders on top of that, then nothing's getting solved.
But these people have just as much right as we do to come to the United States.
I think
the policies have changed, but even if it doesn't,
no one living outside the United States is entitled to the rights of an American to be here. But like that's where I draw the line. Like I would never say that someone who lives in the Philippines or England has just as much of a right to come into America from wherever they are without contributing anything to it, just because they want to leave, because that's not how it works anywhere else in the world. If America is the only country with open borders and being like, hey, we'll take care of you even though our system can't handle it, we devalue and actually
well, none of us want America to be the only country with open borders. We want to get rid of borders altogether.
Well, unless you convince other countries all around the world to do it, then it's not going to matter. And
well, how about this? We take away open borders here, and it kind of permeates throughout the world.
Oh, it's not going to happen that way.
But regardless, I mean, it's an accelerant to the process that's currently going on.
Has that never happened?
If the United States is going bankrupt, then fuck yeah, let's let it go bankrupt. Let's add more people to it. If that's really what the fucking conservatives think, is that the United States is going to go bankrupt because of immigrants, even though it's the fucking natural citizens that live here that are eating welfare and not the people coming in, fucking let it happen. Let the goddamn system collapse. That's the best thing that could happen. Let it collapse.
But then that would. You're assuming that if the system collapses, that something better might pop up out of that. What most of the time happens when a state collapses is that political instability, social instability tend to arise from that, and more people end up getting hurt. And I'm not willing to sort of bend my knee and let that happen. I'm willing to help those who are currently here and those who are seeking to come here. And if they come here illegally, I will help them, but I'm not going to actively encourage them to do so, because I have a duty to help those who are already here.
What about like people that have been harmed by the United States policy? Say like your family has been killed by the United States, your uncle, your aunt, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister has been killed by the United States.
Open borders. That's different. That's an obligation to ramify rather than saying any person who we haven't ever hurt can come here. That's completely different.
Yeah, bringing in refugees that we create is not quite open borders.
No. I agree with the whole refugee thing. We fucked up Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. We fucked up so many countries. And I say, for those who we affected, come here. But saying open borders to people who we haven't even touched, or to countries that the United States doesn't really have an influence in, that's completely different.
Well, what if American tariffs and taxes and stuff like that have affected other nations that you don't realize?
American terrorist attacks?
Tariffs. And
Tariffs.
taxes.
Well,
Tariffs and
tariffs
taxes.
in all kinds of countries. Yeah,
Right.
England does it. They have no obligation to bring in people from Argentina. Russia has tariffs on Kazakhstan. Everyone has tariffs on everything, and that's not a justification for open borders. And if the United States is the only country with open borders, but all other countries have quote unquote borders, then we're going to be dealing with an issue of whether or not the United States is even a sovereign country. What makes the United States a global superpower, and what makes the United States have the ability to be able to dictate world policy in favor of itself, is that they have control of their borders, and they can strictly define what their borders are. If you have China, the reason why it's not a global superpower, why it's mainly more of a regional power, I would argue it's an economic superpower, but it's a global regional power, is because it still cannot dictate where its borders are. They still have border skirmishes with India. They still have it with a few other surrounding regions. And so by not having a border, by not being able to say, you have to follow these laws if you're coming in, then the problem is that you don't have a legitimate state, and that's
honestly, it sounds pretty conservative to me. It does not sound progressive whatsoever.
No, I said I don't take a huge progressive stance when it comes to immigration, because I think borders matter. But I think that if someone comes here illegally, we should be doing our best to help them out if they're here. That means giving them access to
But like, say the people of Mexico that are affected by U.S. drug policy and so many other,
and we have to change our foreign policy in order to address that. But that doesn't mean that we open up our border. If our foreign policy doesn't change, but we open up our border, we're importing tons more people here than we can actually help. Part of ensuring a better life for Americans and giving Americans a better life and giving immigrants more opportunities is to defend those opportunities and make sure there's enough for them to be here. If we accept 1 million people, if let's say we accept 2 million people, which would absolutely destroy our social safety nets in the United States within 1 year. So what? That only destroys. That not only does not improve their lives, it devalues.
It improves their lives by them being able to come to a country where they can actually profit and actually like be able to live.
No, because the quality of
they're coming from a country where they can't live on the wages they're currently on, and they come to the United States and they can actually live on the wages they're on.
American wage labor already is at one of its lowest points. It's so devalued.
Yeah, but it's still better than Mexico.
If you bring in 2 million immigrants and they flood the job market and barely take any sort of money from it, right? That value goes down even more. The quality of life disproves. There's less money in the system, and then
but those people coming from Mexico are going to live better than they currently live in Mexico. And they're going to bring the dollar value of labor down, which is going to benefit everybody when it comes to.
I would never argue
the price of products.
Argue that working for unfair labor is a good thing. I
don't think it's unfair. I think when they come here and they work for better than what they're making at home.
That means that the Americans that are here, who were doing that job, could possibly be removed because someone is willing to do that less. Meaning that person no longer is able to afford this or that unless they get another job, and then that ultimately makes their life worse. I'm all for having people come to the United States, but not at the expense of Americans already here. Because if it's
what does it matter if they're
So, well, I think we could probably go on about this forever because we obviously have some definite disagreements. But I think we've been live for about an hour and a half now, so I'd say maybe about time to wrap it up, call it a day.
Yeah. I liked him. He was fun.
We didn't even get into the Second Amendment. We didn't even get there yet.
we maybe we'll have to do a part 2. This is fun. This is healthy, good discussion. So,
I will like to say this at my end. I am not willing to see the collapse of a state just because I have a moral obligation to a certain ideology. I'm not willing to see states collapse if it means an overall worse system for everyone else there. I'm just going to say that. And I will never falter on that.
I think the collapse of the American state would be the best for everything. For everything.
That's
for
where
everybody,
that's where
everyone.
you and I differ. I would rather see America fix itself rather than see it collapse.
All right. All right.
All right.
I
So,
agree to disagree there.
So, but yeah, no, lots of fun. Like I said, I don't know, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 sometime.
That was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, if you want to wrap it up, John, since you're good at that.
Yeah. Oh, me. Okay, I wasn't sure which one you were talking to.
Oh yeah, Daddy John over there.
Wait, what? What's going on?
Wait,
I'm so lost. I'm so lost right now.
John H or John H?
John H.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, other John, for coming on with us today. It was fun. And
Very
to
fun.
everybody else, we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
All right.
Buy shirt, get money. No, other way. We get money. You send money, we get shirt.